To open an application with the capability APIs, we use the OpenApp method on the root API. The method requires at least one parameter, which is the ID of the application to open. Now this will either be the unique ID of the application, or in the case of Qlik Sense Desktop, the name of the QVF file, including the file extension and either with or without the fully qualified path. To ensure Qlik knows where to find the application, we'll also pass in a second parameter. And we'll deal with this first, by creating a new variable to store some configuration parameters. The variable will be an object, and will store the values host, port, prefix, and is secure. The host value should be the name or IP of the machine hosting the Qlik Sense proxy, which in the case of Qlik Sense Desktop is localhost. The port refers to the HTTP port being used by the proxy, and typically this would be 80 for HTTP and 443 for HTTPS. With Qlik Sense Desktop, it's 4848. The prefix determines which virtual proxy should be used, and the default is just a /. And finally, the isSecure parameter, which should be true if running over HTTPS, otherwise it's false. In our case, it's false. To open the application, we can now use the OpenApp method, passing in the name or ID of our application and the config variable we just created. We'll store the result in a new variable called app. And this is a representation of the app API, which exposes a lot of different capabilities. Here are just a few of the things that we can do with it. We can now start consuming and creating content. And the capability APIs provide various ways of working with visualizations, one of which is to take an existing item from a sheet in a Qlik Sense app and render it in a web page. And we can do this with a single line using the getObject method from the app API. The method accepts up to 3 parameters: a variable that contains either an HTML element or the ID of an element, the object ID of the Qlik object we want to embed, and optionally some additional settings that can toggle interactions and selections. To get the Qlik object ID, we can use the Dev Hub, and more specifically, the Single Configurator tool. This allows us to connect to an app and browse its visualizations. When one is selected, its ID is shown here. It's also possible to select and view sheets. However, the capability APIs do not support the embedding of an entire sheet. To make sure our HTML element is primed and ready for hosting a Qlik object, we need to give it an ID and make sure it has a defined width and height. Qlik objects are designed to consume all of the space available in its designated parent element. If we don't explicitly specify the size, we could end up with an object that exists within the HTML markup, but we can't see it, because it has either a height or width of 0. We'll set up our object like this, giving it a class and an ID, and we'll create a new class definition in our CSS that contains a height declaration. We won't worry about the width because we're using a div, which, unless otherwise specified, will have a width of 100%. To embed the object in our web application, we call app.getObject, passing in the ID that we've obtained for the HTML element and followed by the Qlik object ID. One of Qlik's most powerful features is its associative technology. To make full use of it, it's important to understand the context of your application, or to put it simply, what selections and filters have been made. The capability APIs make it incredibly easy to take the entire current selections bar and embed it in our web application. So simple, in fact, that it's only a single line of code and uses the same getObject method. We simply specify current selections as the Qlik object ID, and we'll get the full power of that search bar in our web application. Well, almost. The more recent visual search isn't available in the context of a mashup. Now it's time for you to try. You can stay up to date with all of our content by subscribing to our YouTube channel or following us on social media.
If you'd like a more interactive learning experience, then head over to websy.academy, where you'll find our full set of training courses complete with hands-on activities and much more.